The first time I went to China took a boat from Japan, arrived in Shanghai. That was in 1986. And I remember very distinctly the Chinese who were, had the little pulleys with, the Japanese-made refrigerators on them. Because, well, at that time, even if there was a refrigerator in what would be called a department store, you couldn't buy it actually. It was just for display. Going from that kind of period where everything was imported, any kind of technology products, to now where they're making everything for the rest of the world. There's been this huge transition, depending on anything, almost anything with technology-based, even simple products, having to be imported for the quality, for the quantity. Going from that to now China is not just producing the standard kind of stuff, but in many fields producing the kind of leading technologies. I mean, the high-speed rail, for example, is a great example where they are competing in third markets with the leaders internationally, the Japanese, the Europeans. And I think that's where, in different fields, this is happening at a different pace. But the Chinese government is clearly, they've been focused on indigenous innovation for a long time. They didn't have all the pieces. They didn't have all the human capital, basically, to do that. Funding was, there was some funding that was spotty. It wasn't, strategically done. And also, how they funded it. There's a lot of messing around with how do we get these innovations. But I think they've really worked out that system much better now. And so I think that's, you hear about, we're not supposed to say it, China 2025, where they went in about 10 different broad areas. They want to catch up, and then by 2030 plus, depending on the sector, actually be at the technological frontier. That energy, that kind of single focus on getting to the edge, I think that's going to take them a long way. Clearly, that's not enough. You need the technology. You need to think smart, not just work hard, but work smart. And that goes back to the kind of the question of the efficiency of the investments in technology development. It's not so efficient yet, but no one's really calculating the return on investment in a kind of a clear business case way for each project. Because the objective for many of the projects that are being funded, especially in the more basic research and some more deep tech-driven based applied research and development, is really about achieving certain performance and capabilities and technologies, not about the return on that investment. Because it's seen as strategically that the return will come, and we need to have, the Chinese government, the people who are doing the research, really feel this need that we have to achieve that. So, the funding, if that field or that particular technology or that more specific project is seen as being potentially contributing to that goal and objective, it's going to get funding. I have no understanding about how this money rolls, but when the Chinese government believes that it's worth doing, the money is going to be there. People, they don't talk if it's a national priority, like, again, getting ahead in technology in these different fields, these different sectors, these different areas of technology, whether it's AI or new materials or biotech or transportation, the money's there. Is it allocated efficiently? Again, that's the wrong question to ask, because the objectives are not about, from the government's point of view, are not about this financial return on investment. Okay, if the government puts in 1 billion yen, can it expect to get that back? No one's making that calculation, as far as I can tell. So that's something that, if you combine, huge, store of human capital. I mean, hundreds of thousands of graduate students from China have gone to the US, Europe, Japan, and they're all coming back. They're not staying there. It used to be a one-way ticket. But then starting around 1994, the Chinese started seeing, the ones who had been abroad for a while started seeing China was starting to, get its act together. Lots more opportunities that they saw there, especially for them with advanced degrees, experience abroad. And so that's when the U-turn started. And So now if you look at graphs, there's a lag, but the number of students who have gone abroad and the number of students who are returning, it's kind of tracking. And it's been increasing. COVID, messed things up a bit, but I think now like something like 250, 300,000 Chinese students just went to the U.S. or back to the U.S. to study. So, those are pretty impressive numbers, and especially they're going there, getting that experience, and they're bringing that back. I think that's a huge strength, and I see many of them also are continuing to go into the technology field. So some are going into investment banking, just like in the U.S., but I think it's a much lower percentage because I think there are also a lot of rewards for going into these science technology areas. In China, it's been years since I've touched cash, and don't even use a credit card, because we have this WeChat Pay, this payment system that it's all linked. When I go back to the U.S. or some other places where cash or you have this credit card that you have to stick in something. It just seems so primitive. Even the tap thing. But the fact that on this one platform, basically I do everything. I buy my train tickets. I pay my electric bill. I order everything. It's just pretty amazing. And then going back to the U.S., where you have these little isolated, independent apps that are doing one function basically. It's just really annoying. So, here in Southeast Asia, you have Grabs. It seems to have a broad kind of platform. It's a little bit closer to that. I don't see anything like that in the U.S. For now. But I think that's a convenience thing. And that's you have 800 million, probably close to a billion people using the system. So it's incredibly successful, useful, etc. I think for me what it represents also is a willingness to quickly adapt to the new stuff. So I first came across this in Japan, because you'd always take these funny photos of monks using mobile phones and stuff like that, because it seems kind of contradictory or kind of, there's something really old, or an older person using some of these advanced technologies. But I think there's much more. I saw this first in Japan, and I see it in China definitely, and maybe it's a broader thing, but this openness to adopting new technologies, not being resisting. I contrast that with a lot of my my parents or that kind of generation who just my father was very proud that he never touched a computer. He never used a computer. I looked at it to see our Facebook feeds or something, but he never kind of did it. And almost kind of proud of it, kind of weirdly. And so we don't need that. What's good is that? But I think that openness to the new technologies and then kind of willingness to kind of play with that, I think that's also part of what I see the strength of China, that they will come up with they'll apply these technologies in ways that seem stupid, silly. For example, a hot pot restaurant, Haidi Lao. I don't know if they're here, they have a few branches in other countries, but so a big, hot pot. You put the meats and vegetables in there and dip it and eat it. They deliver the little trays of meats or vegetables or something by little robots going through the restaurant, which I don't know. It attracted a lot of people. They were a lot of people. That first place opened. They were going there just to see the robots and all kind of photos of it. It seems kind of silly, really. Did you really need that? But the sense that it's kind of a trial of applications of these robots where lots of people are, and so it's a chance to kind of test things in the field. And I think there's much more openness to that, both let's try, let's just apply this. It sounds kind of weird, but and maybe now they think, oh, that sounds weird. Oh, well, let's try it that way. And some of these experiments or pilots, look, why would you bother doing that? They might get cut out from the beginning, never get done in other places. And so I think that willingness to try and to apply new technologies, more basic technologies, core technologies, in lots of different areas, not just where it was first directed towards. I think that's also a strength. Yeah, a lot of things, whether it's about the technology that I mentioned before, technology, investment in R&D, for example, no one's talking about the return on that investment. And they're talking about the way I think of it is efficiency or effectiveness, not efficiency, effectiveness in getting it done, achieving whatever that objective is. What's the cost of that? Well, if there's consensus that that's an important objective, no one's going to bring that up. Somehow we will get the funding for that. The COVID response is, one thing. The amount of resources that have gone into that. I mean, for close to a year, they had people stationed at each end of a street, throughout neighborhoods. They had whole neighborhood committees, all kind of monitoring the people going in and out, 24/7, across a country that big. Or think about when there's a few cases in Dalian or Xi'an, and then you have all of these, in a few days they will test 10 million people. The amount of resources it takes to do that is staggering, but I've never heard any mention of, so what is the cost of, the kind of out-of-pocket cost, so to speak? I mean, it's spread out, so it's not like one agency is funding all of this COVID response. It's all kind of spread out and hidden within existing budgets and things. But no one has talked about that. And so that, I think a lot of but it also goes down to company levels. If it's seen as being worthwhile, it's going to be done. And what is the efficiency of the individuals doing the productivity? It's not often that sort of discussion, part of the discussion, if it's seen as being important enough. Whereas I think in the U.S. there's this hyper emphasis on economic efficiency and demonstrable business case, and a lot of things aren't done because they don't meet whatever the threshold is, or you cannot show what is the return on the investment. Therefore, it won't be funded, it won't be done. Companies then are also going to this hyper economic efficiency, and we saw the dangers of that by cutting out all fat with COVID, or anytime there's been a supply chain disruption. So it's not just COVID. I mean, lots of companies got caught by that. Toyota, they had one supplier up in Fukushima. So when the tidal wave and the radiation knocked that supplier out, they were in trouble because they had such an incredibly efficient supply chain, but it was also extremely fragile at the same time. And so I think that has those implications. If you optimize too much on either of them, it seems like they're untenable. But going back to there's a lot of talk about the competition between the U.S. and China. If you have one side that is making investment decisions based on efficiency, and another one that's making them based on kind of strategic effectiveness, and doesn't run out of money, they're going to get ahead. I've come across a lot of some of the startups in the different regions, both in Vietnam and Singapore and out here in Thailand. I've had a chance to meet a few. But it seems like everyone's only thinking about the domestic market, or if they're going to sell, they're going to find a distributor for their thing, just kind of send it over there. I think there's a very limited view of what the potential are for more within the region, cross-country kind of interactions. I mean, just working with this company, a new startup, for example, that's kind of like an angel list. It's helping ventures in, I call it ASEAN++. So some extends into Pakistan, extends into some into India. They have some ventures there. So broadly, not just in ASEAN, technically ASEAN region, but so not China, not Japan. So kind of excluding those, and so they have very much a regional approach. They have angels throughout the region investing in ventures across the region. And there's a lot. So that's one way that there could be, rather than just looking for funding, a Thai startup looking for funding in Thailand, open up to look more broadly, or to have more kind of deeper collaborations, not just a distributorship kind of thing, but co-development. Now with a lot of things, you don't have to rely on coders who are just based here in Thailand. You can have these kind of virtual, you can call them born global ventures, where just from the beginning, you're not just operating, or not everything is being done just in one place, in one building, in one city. That it's kind of like, I have this, working with a small little venture that, one guy is for live streaming kind of hardware, software platform. He's in Tianjin. One of the partners is in Vietnam, and another one is in India now. And they have this company, and the company is registered in Singapore. That's what I mean by having a little bit, more kind of, being able to draw on people, have different parts of your organization, your activities across the region. The Opposable Mind. And it was just a lot of stories about what then, in the next book that he and someone else wrote, Jennifer someone, wrote, called Creating Great Choices, is this idea of, rather than either or, do both and. So when you're trying to solve problems or come up with answers or new things, often we tend to think, I have to either do this or that. We need to think that there's this trade-off, and so it's like a dilemma: which or when are we going to do? And so those two books are related to this idea that you can come up with more interesting choices or approaches if you start with, we need to do both and. And companies, obviously, we have to take care of business today and tomorrow. We have to, be ready for, business in the world, 5 years from now. You have that present versus future emphasis. So I think that's kind of, the political situation in the U.S. is that's where another very different context where I heard this being used. Families where some people really like Trump and some people really don't like Trump, and those ways of thinking. Some of the families, there are big problems within them. And so there was this whole episode on, I listened to a lot of podcasts, and one of them is called The Hidden Brain. And it's kind of applied psychology, along with Freakonomics and Planet Money, and these are all, very interesting ones. But this hidden brain is more kind of applied psychology. And so one constructive approach is, you're both a Trump supporter and my brother. So rather than saying, okay, you're a Trump supporter, therefore I can't stand you, or you're my brother, therefore I like you. Well, you're kind of both.